Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Success and More Interesting Stuff, brought to you by Livewire Markets. I'm Matthew Kidman. David Lyons has travelled around the world chasing a rugby ball. From the time he started to take the game seriously as a 15-year-old, he was earmarked for success. Twice he toured Europe with the Australian schoolboys, opening his eyes to a world significantly larger than the one he experienced growing up in the New South Wales country town of Molong. Lyons played 46 tests for the Wallabies over 8 years, including 2 World Cups and a British Lions tour. At just 28 years of age, he picked up his ball and moved to Wales for a few seasons before settling in France for a longer stint. It was in Europe that he started to plan for the future. He studied at Oxford and in Monaco. This set him up for a career in finance. Heading back to Australia, Lyons picked up a role at KPMG before eventually deciding to pitch his own tent. In 2021, he joined with some other like-minded professionals and launched AAG Partners. The group specialises in the agricultural sector. Acutely aware from his farming days in Molong of the financial volatility in the agricultural industry, he has deliberately sought out ways to deliver higher returns with less risk. The business is out of the ground and moving forward, with Lyons locked in tightly at the back of the scrum. Welcome, David.
Thanks, mate. Really good to be here and looking forward to the chat with you.
Thank you. Now, something I didn't mention was you went away to boarding school.
Yeah.
Hurlston Ag,
Yeah.
back in the southwest of Sydney, not far from where I went to boarding school at St Gregory's down the road. But it's probably not known for, it was a good rugby school, but it's not known for its Wallabies or rugby union, but maybe for its couple of famous politicians.
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely sort of nurtures a broad take on the world there, but yeah, went to school there. We obviously played a bit of rugby. It was the main sport, but it's not like, some of the other big schools in Sydney, right? So, it was a good rugby school, but it was a school that was more about learning. It was, a selective agricultural high school. So the big focus there was schoolwork and being at the front of the industry in agriculture as well.
Must have been quite a cerebral school, even though it was an ag school. Not them saying the two aren't compatible, but ag keeps coming up in your life, farms, and then you studied it later in the Hurlston Ag. But there was Mark Latham, there was John Kieran, some famous names in Australian politics, good and bad memories, but it must have been quite a good place to learn. That was interesting what you just said before, that not a famous rugby school, not a GPS or a CAS school, but somehow you got noticed. And my take on, you came from Molong and you played a lot of sports, but when you got to Hurlston, you kind of narrowed down rugby. How did you get noticed? What was that step that...
I think the rugby system, and probably more so then, it wasn't as dominated just by the big private schools. I think, state schools and the smaller private schools, the players from those schools were looked at a lot and formed an important part of the rep team. So just coming through the smaller school rep system, I got noticed.
And so you played for the school, then the local region, and then what, for New South Wales?
Yeah, then played for New South Wales CHS, which is the state schools, combined high schools. When I was playing, the combined high schools, we beat GPS and CAS in the couple of years that I played. So that doesn't happen too often anymore. But it just goes to show at that time in rugby in Australia, what a broad net we were casting over the talent.
Yeah, it definitely changed. I remember when I was younger, the combined high schools became quite a force in that period. So it was much more egalitarian rugby in general. But did that surprise you? How you had quite a meteoric rise, and by year 11, you're at Australian schoolboy stage.
Yeah, I think I'd always played rugby and rugby league and other sports, but it wasn't until I went to Hurlston at 15 and started playing every weekend. Junior rugby closed down in my hometown of Molong when I was younger, so never used to play it week in, week out. Thankfully, it's started again now and very strong, the junior rugby back in Molong. But so I didn't have the opportunity to play regularly when I was in primary school and things like that. But going away to school, playing week in, week out, I just thrived on that and just really enjoyed the game.
Must have given you a lot of confidence.
It did.
Especially when you come from a small town.
Yeah, it does. It gives you a lot of confidence, but I think at that young age, you take everything in your stride. Looking back now, I can reflect on it and think what a meteoric and quick rise it was, but you just take it in your stride and you don't really think about it when you're a young kid.
In the intro, I mentioned that you went on a couple of schoolboy tours, and that was a bit of an eye-opener for you about what was out there, a lot different to being in deep southwest Sydney or Molong.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the best things about rugby, and it's still the same now, is it's a truly global sport. And from that young age, going on a number of European tours. I was lucky enough I was the captain of the Australian schoolboys in my last year, and we went on an amazing 9-week tour to Canada, UK and Ireland, and that was such an eye-opener just to see how big the game of rugby was in these traditional areas, and to be a part of that and to go on a undefeated Australian schoolboys tour. I was with the likes of George Smith, was one of my back row teammates, and a number of other guys that came through professionally. And it doesn't happen as much now, but there's a famous tour of the Ellers when they were in schoolboys, and I think there were 7 or 8 Wallabies come out of that one schoolboy team. So it's something we've done well in the past. It's dropped off a bit, but I'd love to see these long schoolboy tours happen again.
And what kind of captain were you?
I think the same way I am there. I've never been that type of captain that, rants from the top of the turrets and asks people to get on board. I think the best captains are the people that lead by example, but also have the confidence in themselves and in their values to pull people aside and have a quiet one-on-one chat when is needed. And that's how I still live my life now.
Well, hopefully there weren't too many of that on that tour, given you're undefeated. So, but then you went on, you left there, and despite playing a lot of rugby, you found time to qualify to go to uni.
Yeah.
And you studied ag economics. So ag stayed in the system. What was the drive behind that? Just interest on both sides, the economics and
always,
the agriculture?
with my agricultural background, growing up in Molong, from a hard-working farming family, always had an interest in agriculture, but at the same time, right from an early age, appreciated how the world works, appreciated, what it takes to succeed, and, established right from a young age, always quite entrepreneurial, setting up businesses.
Even when you're out at Molong?
Even on Molong. One of my first business, I remember I used to work a lot in the shearing sheds in the school holidays as a rouseabout, make money right from a young age, and working for a couple of years in the school holidays as a rouseabout, saved up money, actually from a young age built and established my own piggery, and started with a few number of sows, built that up over time. And I used to do things even then, working out that feed costs were really killing me here. Like Dad didn't really help me from a financial point of view, but he'd give me guidance. And I worked out that, I could go into the big bakery in Orange and get some of their, take away from some of their old bread and bakery products and misfit bread products. I found a potato producer that could never sell all these potatoes each year. I'd get those, and to supplement the feed cost by doing things like that and feeding them to the pigs. Cost
of goods always very important. Did the pigs make you money?
Yeah, they did in there. Like, I was one of those kids. By the time I'd left school, I'd saved over $100,000 and was ready to.
Even when you were in boarding school.
Yeah, so I was quite lucky. My mum helped me feed the pigs when I was away in boarding school.
Cheap labour too.
Yeah. So that was quite good.
That's a big number for any kid but that was a couple of decades ago.
Yeah, I'm getting old now.
So that was a good start. No wonder you could spend a lot of time at uni playing rugby. But uni was obviously a pivotal point because the rugby became very serious.
Yeah.
I know you've talked about being, I think, at Wesley College, co-ed, and you were able to, in the championships there, beat a couple of the all-boys schools in the rugby championship. But at the same time, you were quickly into the Waratahs training squad, and before you knew it, you were playing for the Wallabies. That must have been an exciting time.
Yeah, it was very exciting. Like I said, it sort of all just happened quickly. I was in first year of university, 1999. I'll never forget, we're in the junior common room watching the Wallabies win the World Cup. I hadn't played for the Waratahs. I got signed straight out of school. I was one of the first people to ever, I think I was the first to ever be signed still at school, which happens all the time now, far too quickly, I think, if you ask my opinion. But I'll never forget 1999, watching these great players lift the Webb Ellis Trophy, win the World Cup. I'd never played a professional game of rugby, and the very next game after that World Cup, the Wallabies played, I made my debut against Argentina. So, within
that was the next Southern Hemisphere season, wasn't it?
Yeah, the next season, played Argentina, came off the bench as I think I just turned 20 that week or the week before, and made my debut. And it, like I said, didn't even really think about it. It just happened.
And given what you said earlier, you've had a couple of really sharp rises from 15-year-old into the Australian schoolboys, and then this one. Obviously, that team was pretty stacked with big names. The Wallaby side then was, as you said, world champions.
Well, that's what I mean.
Must have been you felt overawed a little bit.
One of the things with rugby, I never felt overawed. I don't think I was ever cocky, but I always had the confidence in my own ability that as a young kid, I could do things that not a lot of other forwards could do, like with speed and stepping and things like that. And even though I admired these greats that I'd grown up watching, John Eel, like going into a side that had John Eales, Matt Burke, Tim Horan, Gregan, Larkham, going in there as a 19, 20-year-old, I respected them. I wasn't confident enough to say too much to them, but when it got on the training field, I still had confidence in my own ability.
And that speed and step, do you think that comes from being more diverse in your sporting junior days where you played different sports?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think, I was one of those kids that just loved every sport. Like whatever was on TV at the time, cricket, tennis, rugby, I'd still play kick in the backyard, baseball, hockey. Hockey was the only real winter junior sport that was still running in Molong when I was a kid, and
forced to play it.
And so I played that and was quite good at that as well. And I think a lot of my sort of speed and stamina probably came from all those seasons in the cold winters in Orange playing hockey from 9, 10 years old.
Well, it's interesting. Hockey is an interesting game because it is a runner's game. I mean, I'm lucky enough just to see it at the Olympics. Yeah. And they're generally smaller, slight guys who are running flat out for the whole period of the match, over an hour. But you had the pace despite obviously being bigger, being a forward. So that's a good combination. Yeah,
definitely. I think a lot of that, and, just playing a lot of ball bat sports, cricket, tennis, things like that as well, probably helped my coordination and things like that. I think one of the issues, I guess, is a bit of a lack of that versatility in young players coming through, and that ability to sort of read situations. The way things are now, even from a young age, you look at the GPS schools, there's so much science behind it. They all have GPS monitoring. They all go to the gym 4 times a week.
Become very specialised.
Yeah, very specialised and very sort of transfixed on the raw numbers, not on that general rugby IQ and game understanding, which is something I think in particular those great players that you talked about that I was lucky enough to play with when I debuted, on top of being, physically very good, they just had this great understanding for the game and how to read the game. And I think that's something that all around the world, it's probably gone out of the game a little bit.
And I mentioned in the introduction that you managed to play a Lions tour when you were pretty young and into Australia, and then you obviously played the 2 World Cups, but the 2003 World Cup, famous here, made the final, knocked off the All Blacks, which must have been a terrific feel, especially when there was 100,000 people watching. Then you faced the English, and of course Johnny Wilkinson got them home. That's an interesting period. And we'll get to probably the more salient question in a minute, but Wilkinson was a step above everyone, very calm under pressure. What did you take away from that?
Yeah, definitely. I think he was just had a really fine-tuned skilled set. Like, there's been better all-round number 10s in the game. You look at Larkham is probably the best running number 10. Dan Carter is probably the best all-round number 10. But Wilkinson was definitely the best kicking, controlling 10 that we've seen.
And he had that big forward pack.
Yeah, and that just really, once I got to know him a lot more playing in Europe, you realised what an obsessive compulsive he was, and how and you realised it was no fluke that he could deliver that off his wrong foot under pressure. He's someone like, there's stories him playing Christmas Day even. He'll go out and he will kick and kick and kick, and he always finishes with having to get, I think it's 10 from 10, his last 10 kicks, or he won't, go in. And there's stories about him one Christmas Day could never get the 10 from 10 difficult kicks and was out there for about 4 hours on a Christmas Day until he actually got it right. And that
he would have been in trouble.
Yeah, and that shows you just what it takes to be so good at one particular skill set. It takes true dedication, and that's something you've got to admire by some of the really best players in the world.
And on the same theme, I've heard you say before in another interview that what you consider the truly great people are at their best when they need to be. Wouldn't mind you elaborating on that pretty strong comment. Yeah. Is that people are best under pressure? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean the true greats, whether it's in business or sport or anywhere. A real trait I've seen, and it started with rugby and then seen it in business now, that the true leaders and the true people that are best in their field really get this laser-like focus when the pressure's on. When they need to deliver, they deliver. I think being your absolute best week in, week out is not that easy, but the true greats in anything, when it's time to be at your best and focus, they're the people that, will set up the winning try or kick the winning drop goal to win a World Cup, or, when their business is under trouble, the share price is in trouble, they're the ones that will see what it is they need to clarify, rally the rest of the team around them and make the difference. And I think, that's
so they confront the issue.
They confront the issue, and they bring people along with them for the journey. They have trust in the people around them, and they bring them along the journey, but they're the ones that want to take the lead. They're not happy to sit back and for it to be someone else's problem. They're the ones that want to own the big moments, and that's a trait that I've seen in a lot of the greats, all in different fields.
Yeah, besides Johnny Wilkinson, can you give us a few more names that you put in that category?
Oh, I think you look at some of the Australian rugby greats, John Eales. Who do you rely on? Even John Eales to kick a winning Bledisloe Cup goal, not the main kicker, who put their hand up when the regular kicker was off the field and kicked a goal from the sideline, John Eales. Look at how many times Tim Horan or Stephen Larkham, when we're behind in a game, who's the one that wants the ball in their hand and will see the opportunity and take it to make the break to set us up to score tries? It's those great players.
And you've seen that in business as well?
Yeah, you see it time and time. When you see a company, it's a good company, and they might be under pressure. The really good CEOs or chairmen are the ones that, come forward. They explain what the issues are. They tell people what they're going to do to fix them, and they actually do what they say they're going to do, and their team supports them to do that.
Now, the other thing I did hear you say was that over time, especially in rugby, I think you're referring to at this point, was that you learnt more from the great players around you than you did from any coach in particular, and I'm sure you've had some great coaches. Maybe elaborate a little bit on that. Is that how you learn, by watching others rather than kind of listening to what's out there and getting the right kind of message from your coaches? Yeah,
definitely. I think, and it's the same in business. The coach or the CEO, they can sort of dictate the overall philosophy or plan, but the people that are living it day in, day out, the people that you have to follow, the people that you interact with on the training field, in the office, are the senior people, and they're the ones that really have the biggest influence on any organisation or any sporting team. They're the ones that really set the culture. And I think, a coach or a CEO, they can do a bit, but ultimately you need that real key group of 6, 7, 8, depending on the size of your organisation or team, leaders that are truly good leaders, but also very good at what they do, a lead at what they do.
I've always thought that when you're investing professionally, which you obviously do now full time, that the people who, and it's true to what you're saying, they're the people who have the biggest influence on how you go about your processes and your thinking, are the people that you're exposed to, especially when you're young. Yeah. They're very influential. Have you had anyone in your business life that's done that for you? Have you been lucky enough to come across some good leaders?
Yeah, I was quite lucky going to Sydney University, studying there, but also playing rugby there. It's such a great rugby club for, not only from the amount of Wallabies we've produced, but the amount of really good business people. And right from an early age came to Sydney, a guy that's been a mentor of mine ever since I was an 18-year-old, David Mortimer, very experienced businessman around Australia. He's sort of taken me under his wing from a very, very early age, and he's probably the person I've learnt the most from a business point of view. And like I said, like the truly great rugby players that I got to play with, I see all the same similar traits in him. Someone that, truly a leader at what they've done over the years, but someone that will confront the issues, attack them head on, and get them solved in a clear and sort of concise way. So he's someone that I continue to talk to today, on a regular basis, and helps me a lot. Yeah,
very important. Now, interesting. I said it in the introduction that you're probably still in your prime of your rugby career in Australia, and you packed up and went to Wales first, and then you went to France. What big decision in your life, pivotal decision? What inspired that?
I just think, I'm one of those people. I really loved playing for the Wallabies and loved playing rugby here in the country, but I realised what a global game rugby was, and I'd done nearly 10 seasons professionally in Australia. It was a thing, there's a lot more out there to experience in rugby, and so I decided for me and my family it was the right time to go overseas and have a genuine long stint at experience rugby cultures overseas.
But while you're away, you have to give up playing for the Wallabies.
Yeah, that's right, particularly back then. It was a big decision at the time, but I think I was ready for a change, and I was really ready to experience something else. So I was lucky enough. Originally, I went over to the Scarlets in Wales, and one thing I learnt there is you realise in Wales, and it's a little bit the same in New Zealand, just what an important part of their culture it is. Playing in Llanelli, it was an old mining steel town back in the day, and you really see that for so long this town's identity was based on their rugby team. The famous stadium in Wales, in Llanelli, is called Stratty Park, and that was a stadium. The Scarlets, one of the only provincial teams to ever beat the All Blacks. They've beaten the Springboks, the Wallabies at this stadium, and I was lucky enough to play in the last ever game at Stratty Park. And I've never been to a game that's more atmospheric. Like, I played World Cup finals, like you said, but
wow.
There was probably 18,000 people that were just singing and crying the whole
Emotional.
time. All these people you could see in the crowd, and I spoke to them after. There was people that their dad the dad would come out of the mines or steelworks or wherever they worked, and the only thing they really looked forward to on the weekend was going to watch the Scarlets play. And you could and then you realise in a town like that, it's more than just a passion, it's part of their identity. So that was amazing. And then
Did you give them a win?
Yeah, we had a great win to the last ever game at Stratty Park. And then from there moved over to France, which was somewhere that I always wanted to sort of end my career in France. It's a complete different culture for rugby as well, and really love, particularly playing in Paris. It's such a big city, but still the rugby team there, Stade Francais, still has a important part in the identity of Paris, and it was a great thing. One thing, probably the biggest learning I got out of playing all around the world, and particularly playing overseas with people from all different cultures, from a leadership point of view, you really realise how different everyone's motivated and how to lead people from different cultures. I think playing in Australia for so long, we're very analytical in how we approach rugby, and always were. But going over there, particularly the French and the Italians and the Argentinians, you really realise that they're motivated a lot more by emotion and motivated a lot more by the group dynamics. Mm-hmm. So for me personally, particularly in Paris, where we had people from all around the world there, and being a leader in that team, it really helped my leadership style to really step back and have the ability to assess, like, the way you're motivated is completely different to the guy that you're playing next to. How do I help get the best out of you?
Great diversity. And while you're away in that period, it seems like, and I'm not so certain about this, but it seems like you did quite a bit of study. So it was quite a full bill for you. You had family, you had study. What was your study? What did it entail, and what were you looking at?
That's something I've always done. I think one of the good things about playing professional sport is, you're busy and it's physical when you're on the field, but you get a lot of downtime hours to rest. So, I was someone that always initially studied at the same time, and then whenever I had a day off or summer break, would always try and do work experience or work for people, would get into my own investments, own property development business, things like that over time. So moving out, that was something I'd always done in Australia, and that was just when I had an opportunity over in Europe as well. I would, if there's a course I was interested in, studied an MBA while I was over there, studied some other courses while I was over there. So it was something that has always been an important part, and something I even do now. Try to find time to continue to grow and continue to learn. And
did you, once your rugby career was finishing, did you actually work in Europe?
Yeah, the same time, even while I was playing rugby over there, and even later on, I still kept my finger in the investment game. Tried to work whenever I could. There was a number of family offices that I became close to. Tried to work with them in their investment side as well, and then always really had interest in learning about more and more about the investment industry. I'd done it on my own behalf, but continuing to learn off good people, and found that a lot of the same skill sets that helped me succeed in rugby, the planning, the sort of dedication, working with your colleagues around there, the way you analyse and assess another team, that same sort of rigorous process applies to investing in a lot of ways.
And then once again, you make another decision to come back to Australia post-rugby, but your family's pretty settled, I gather, in Paris, was it?
Yeah.
So that's another big decision?
Yeah, it was. They were settled, but I think the kids were growing up, and we thought it'd be good for them to come back for high school in Australia. So we made that decision to come back and do that. And it was a good experience, and the kids love it here. I enjoy it here. I've had a really good network in Europe, but my long-term network is here. So just grown from there, and came back, worked in investment management when I first came back here, and then went over the other side for quite a while to KPMG in Australia, and worked in the advisory side. So enjoyed that as well, and then move on. And then from there decided with a couple of other guys to set up our own investment business nearly 3 years ago now.
So that was an interesting point, you're building your career out post-rugby. And eventually you decided, as we said, pitch your own tent and go into AAG Partners. But that's also a big step in the sense that you lose the institution around you, and it's up to you guys to make it work. Did that require a lot of capital? Was it more than just personal risk that you were moving into this field?
Yeah, definitely. You got to make a commitment, right, to go in. You know, a lot of people, I guess, are too scared. In some ways, it's definitely lack of security, particularly early on when you're trying to build up backing for what you're doing. It's quite a risk early on, but
things like getting mortgages for your home and that become hard work. The banks are not so.
Yeah.
You work for KPMG, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, definitely.
You work for yourself, they kind of look at you strange.
Definitely, but we were just we really personally, I really believed in not only the people that I was working with and their experience in the ag investment industry, but also the way we're investing in agriculture and what we're actually doing. Truly believe in it, and really wanted to grow the business, and also to help other people see what we are doing and how we invest to hopefully help them make some good investments along the way also.
So before we get on to how you do it in AAG and in the ag sector, why would you pick that sector? We talked about it. You grew up on a farm, you studied ag, so it's always been in your life, but it's notoriously a difficult industry, and returns through a cycle never seem to be that high. So why would you pick ag? Is that just your comfort zone that you've got a good deep knowledge? No, just because
I think a lot of the things you said can be perception as well. And I think it's genuinely one of the things you look at major potential investment areas, classes for investment in Australia. One of the things we're truly world class here is agriculture. Our technology, the way we approach farming is first class. We have the most regulated water market in the world, which gives you a lot of confidence. It costs money for the water here, but it gives you confidence in having the ability. You don't lose the water, and I think it's something, particularly you look at America, a similar market to ours from an agricultural point of view, the security of water that we have with our regulation in our water markets here is something that they envy, and they're actually starting to get advice off us on now. But truly, and probably the third one that really attracted me to it long term is being so close to Asia and the huge growing Asian middle class wanting high quality, green, sustainable products that we can produce in Australia at a lower cost to most other places.
So that's a big competitive advantage for Australia, you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things, and this will get onto our philosophy a bit later, but people have the perception, I guess it's looking at investments in agriculture. A lot of people are probably most familiar with looking at listed agricultural companies, right? A lot of the listed agricultural companies are not very asset heavy, and either lease or produce a product. And the problem with that, A, for listed markets, and B, in general, is that you're so reliant on the income from the agriculture, and then you're so exposed to the two things you have no control over, which are commodity prices and weather to some extent if you're not in irrigated agriculture. So one of the biggest things that people don't really realise, but agricultural real estate's actually the most stable real estate class in Australia for well over the last 30, 40 years. So
land values just keep going up.
Yeah, and they're just stable for a long time. So that's one of the things. There's the income of agricultural investment can be very lumpy and cyclical, but the underlying assets in agriculture are very stable, land and water. Sought
after, and banks are happy to support it. I mean, I grew up on an irrigated farm where my parents grew rice, but it was interesting. There was still a lot of risk because you'd grow your rice, but you didn't know the price you get. That would come later in the year, and then you get payments. So all your costs up front, and then you weren't sure of your return till late in the crop process, and then you'd kind of fingers crossed. So it was always difficult, a lot of working capital. And I've always thought tough business, so I thought I'd avoid it as I got older. But with that, why don't we get into some of you talk about philosophy. And in the intro we said, well, trying to get higher returns to less risk. I mean, that's what all of us try and do.
Yeah.
What are some of the ways? I know you've discovered new territory in the form of Northern Territory, which is cotton, which is a big crop for Australia, and it's been a bit controversial lately around cotton in Northern Territory and whether it's good for the territory. But you've gone in there with AAG, and it's great return by the sounds of it. It is a good product.
Yeah, definitely. I think just back into our philosophy, I guess, to start with, what we try to do, we really specialise in property development and change of use in agriculture. So we look to try and find assets, whether that's down south or up north, like you said, where there's a really good water profile. So we like to have high security on our water, but also find land and water assets that can be developed into a new farming system to produce much higher returns for the value of that land and water. So I guess down south, probably looking, even down south.
So you're in Victoria now?
We're looking at assets. We don't have any in Victoria at the moment, but looking down there. But looking to convert, things down south, like even cotton production now, rice, to some extent dairy, but it's not as meaningful. But trying to find assets like that are really good assets with good land in good areas, access or already attached water rights, and converting them to crops that deliver a much better return per megalitre of water, really.
So what would fit into that, Bill?
To give you an idea, even cotton property we're looking at the moment, it's a cotton property, looking at developing that into an almond operation. To give you an idea, to convert with the same land and water, but with extra capital applied to develop the almonds, for per megalitre of water, we can take it from about 7 or 8 times better return from cotton to almonds per megalitre of water.
Wow, that's a quantum leap.
Yeah, and so they're the type of opportunities we look, and that's what sort of got us to looking. Now with the price of water down in the southern regions, you buy a cotton asset in southern Australia, if you get it at a 4 to 5% max return, you're doing well. So that got us to, it's very hard to take investors' money, invest in that, because the big return then you're just reliant on the natural long-term uplift in asset value that you can't guarantee is going to keep happening at the way it's been happening. So that took us to looking up north and the new...
So just before we go up north, so the almonds, if you convert it to almonds, are going to produce mid-20s return from what you've just said then in comparison. Yeah. What are investors looking for in a sector like ag? What have you got to pitch them? What's kind of the hurdle?
Well, it just depends what style. We look for, sort of that 14-15% plus returns. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people that are investing in stabilised assets, looking at that 10 to 12% return long term, but a big chunk of that is reliant on the natural uplift in the asset. What we like to do with the development part of it, the other thing we do is you're not as reliant then on necessarily the income off the asset. You're taking a bigger chunk of the investor returns back to the asset, back to the part of it that's the most stable long-term part. So that's the big part of development. We look to put more of the investor returns into the asset away from the annual income.
Right. So converting it into an almond farm, for example, achieves that goal.
Yeah, it achieves that goal. It not only...
Because they're long-term assets.
They're long-term assets, but you get an immediate uplift in the actual asset value as soon as you finish the development. You get the big chunk of your returns in the early years from completing the development, and that's something you have 100% control over. It's, compared to doing a real estate development, we're in Barangaroo at the moment, out on the street, you have next to no planning risk a lot of the time, and you use good contractors that you can contract up front and things like that. So compared to normal real estate development, it's much easier, lower risk, and you can get similar type of returns.
Okay, so with that we go to the Northern Territory in cotton. Quite a revolutionary kind of move for Australian industries. Cotton's been a profitable crop, especially in northern New South Wales, southern Queensland. But the Northern Territory, it's been difficult. It's a very hot, oppressive kind of climate up there. But it seems like you've found a way.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a big move on to cotton to Northern Australia from a couple of reasons, I guess. The first one, like I said, that the price of water in the southern states has got so high that it's difficult to make, the sort of returns that you want as an investor year in, year out. The farmers that had their assets for a long time are making good returns, but are they making that good of returns compared to the asset value? They're making good returns for what they paid for the asset 10 years ago, but if you boil it down, looking at it with an investor hat on. So we started looking at cotton and what were the opportunities outside, and the team, Andrew Parks and Andrew Audich, the team at CFM, who are my partners in AAG Partners, they were one of the first to take cotton in a big way to southern New South Wales and really respected in the industry. So we were looking at what was happening, and what's brought about the growth in cotton in Northern Australia is really around the new varieties of cotton that are resistant to insects and also resistant to glyphosate. So they're protected. So you can spray a light dusting of glyphosate over it now and the weeds around it won't grow. So that's been a game changer for taking cotton to Northern Australia. We tried to grow it in the 80s up there and it just got eaten out by bugs and weeds competing with it. So that's been the big game changer. This new variety of cotton that we now grow all around the world that is resistant to insects and means you can spray and not have weed problems anymore. And so that's been the game changer. We've seen a really large move to cotton in Northern Australia in the last 5 years up there and getting really, really good results. And the other point of view, I guess, is that it's also from, a big part of what we do, and the second attraction to ag now is the sustainability part. There's, and the other attractive part, I think you're saying why agriculture, is that, with carbon credits and biodiversity credits and all this, there's an extra layer of revenue that you can get in agricultural investments now that really make them stack up even
Never existed 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, that didn't invest in more. And from a sustainability point of view, we all hear, and some of it's founded, some of it's not, all the issues that people are having with cotton and other irrigation on the Murray-Darling. But Northern Australia, if we cut the top third of Australia off, it'd be one of the wettest continents in the world, right? So
there's plenty of water, which cotton needs. Yeah,
so there's plenty of water up there. It's like clockwork. Over the wet season, it rains every year. So it's a big benefit from a sustainability point of view, taking it to Northern Australia where we've got plenty of water. The water's cost next to nothing up there compared to down south where the water prices are astronomical now.
And you're not too worried. I saw a Four Corners show a few weeks ago, and I think it was zeroing in on people who hadn't applied to grow cotton. They were just converting land they had and using the water. Do you think everyone can work through that and see the benefits of what the farmers and these projects are trying to achieve?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as we see a lot with some of these stories in different media sources, that, a lot of it can be a beat up. But the reality is that the amount of cotton, and particularly irrigated cotton, grown in Northern Australia now is minute. Like they tried to make out a lot that irrigated cotton up there is draining water tables and things like that, which is just an outright lie. Because I think last year there was just under 600 hectares only of irrigated cotton grown in all of Northern Territory. So that's next to nothing. And the other thing up there, like we discussed before, there's that much water falls in the wet season that it just runs out to the oceans anyway. We're just, majority of cotton being produced in Northern Australia is rain-fed cotton. So, it's not like we're taking any of that away from up there.
Definitely. So, big career in rugby, forging out a career in funds management and agriculture. Does that move to business and funds management fill the void, or you'll never replace the competitive nature and the adrenaline that comes with a rugby game, or it is replacing it?
It is on a day-to-day level, I think. I think, nothing will ever replace that feeling of running out in a World Cup final in your home city in 2003. But, the day-to-day of working with other great people, being a pioneer in an industry, investing other people's money and doing it very well, it's a great feeling, and it's something that gets me up every day and excited, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to continuing to grow.
We've had a lot of sports people on our show, Success and More Interesting Stuff, and one of the things that is difficult is post-sporting career, being able to reboot and keep going, which we read a lot about sports people can't do that. They never recapture it, but it sounds like you're well on the way. Well done on your rugby career. Good luck in building AAG Partners. I hope it goes well, and thanks for coming to talk to us today.
No, it's a great pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me.